Welcome to How to Shave Years Off Your ED. This is 5 things I'd do differently if I had to go through ED again. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Cam Joyner and I had ED. And so everything that I tell you in this video will actually come from my own personal experience of having had ED or from things I've learned from the 6 years that I've spent coaching guys just like you through the ED process. And so when I had ED, I had it for 7 years and I spent over $150,000 trying to heal it during that time. And so I learned a whole lot about what not to do. And so the point of this video is hopefully just to help you heal significantly faster because it should not take 7 years to heal if you actually take the right steps. So these are the 5 things that I would do differently. I would ask for help sooner. I would focus on solutions. I would spend more time analyzing the problem. I would slow down, and I would speed up. And for each one of these 5 points, I want to go through what I did, how it cost me time, and then what I would do differently. So the first thing that I would do is I would ask for help much sooner. So when I had ED, it took me 3 full years to open up to someone, and this ended up being something that cost me pretty much 3 years. So in that time, what was happening is that I would go into these really bad shame spirals and then I would feel terrible for months. Because I was the only one who knew what I was going through, there was no one there to support me. So basically what would happen is I would just stay miserable much longer than I needed to. So once I started opening up to people in my life about it, they would check in on me and they would help me out. And so what would happen is that I had support. When I went into a spiral, I wouldn't spiral for nearly as long because people would check on me. And then if they knew I wasn't doing well, they would try and help pull me out of it. They would try and get me out of the house. They would get me being social. They would help me have fun. And so the other reason that I think that this is important is that the reaction when I first started telling people was a lot different than what I expected. So one of the first people that I told, it was pretty early on, he was one of my friends and I was expecting him to just make fun of me because, I was a guy who couldn't have sex. As a guy, it feels like intertwined with my manhood. When I opened up to him about it, he was like, "Thank you so much for telling me. I have ED too. I've never, I've felt so alone about this and I'm just glad that we can talk about it." And then another one of our friends actually overheard part of the conversation and was like, "Hey, can I join you? I'm actually struggling with this too." So 2 people that I would have expected to ridicule me not only didn't ridicule me, but they had the same problem. And so I actually probably wouldn't be making videos on the internet about this and helping guys with ED if that conversation hadn't happened, because it started to help me realize it's a really widespread problem. But also pretty much everyone that I told about it reacted much differently than I thought. And that was a really healing experience for me because instead of keeping this shameful thing to myself, I was able to actually talk about it and realize that the way that I was putting pressure on myself about it and the way that I was treating myself about it didn't actually reflect reality. And as you can tell now, I have absolutely no shame about the fact that I had ED because I really just look at it as it was a series of problems that I had in my life that I just had to address. And once I addressed them, they were fine. So my guess is that you're probably thinking, well, Cam, I would never tell someone that I have ED because that sounds terrible. Think about ED as just a health problem. Let's substitute ED for cancer. Imagine telling someone in your life that you have cancer. Chances are their reaction to you having ED is going to be more closely related to if you told them that you had cancer than how you're expecting. Most people realize oh, that sucks. And their reaction is not to think worse of you. It's more, how can I help? What can I do to support you? That's tough. So I would recommend finding people in your life that you think might be sympathetic and just opening up about it because you don't want to go through this battle alone. It makes it so much harder and it will slow down your progress because instead of focusing on things that will make the situation better, you're just battling your own emotions. So that brings me to the next one, which is I would focus more on solutions. And so what I did wrong in this one is that I fixated on how bad ED made me feel. I told myself over and over again that this problem's terrible. I hate it. I want it to go away. And then all the consequences of it, no one's ever going to love me. And I'm never going to be able to have the sex life that I want. And at the time, it felt like, what the hell else could I do? This sucks. And that's true. It does really suck. But what I realized in hindsight is that all the time that I spent in those emotional states, they really weren't allowing me to solve the problem. They were just wasting time. And so what I would do differently is I would start focusing on the solution, and I would do that specifically by asking myself two questions. I remember very clearly the very first time that I asked myself this first question. I asked myself, what have I actually tried to change? And this was actually a pretty emotionally painful question to ask because I had to be honest with myself and that I really hadn't tried that much. I'd been to the doctor and I tried to take Cialis, and neither of those really did anything. And so after that, I kind of just stopped. And I bring this up because the number one response that I get to the question, what have you tried to change, when I get on a call with someone, is they say, I've tried taking Viagra or Cialis, or I've tried watching your YouTube videos. And that's really about it. And so I'm very glad that you watch my YouTube videos. There's important information in there. There's ways that you can, improve your situation. But if you're talking about like things that you've tried, taking Viagra or Cialis and watching YouTube, they don't really count as things that you've tried because you're not really making a behavioral change. Like any problem that you have in your life will require you to change some sort of behavior, and watching YouTube is not a behavioral change, nor is taking Viagra. And so you really need to be honest with yourself about what you're trying to do to change. So part of my big breakthrough there was just being brutally honest with myself about the fact that I wasn't doing anything. And that honesty led me to the next important question, which I would also ask myself, which is, if there is a solution, what would it look like? And so the more I started thinking about what a solution could look like, I didn't really have a clear answer. It started to look like, okay, well, there's something going on in my mind that's causing this problem. And the more I started to think about what a solution would look like, it uncovered a really big problem, which is that my understanding of what was actually going on was completely flawed. I had a big hole in my understanding of the problem. So that brings me to the next one, which is I would spend more time analyzing the problem. And so what I did wrong here is that I called the problem ED. And you probably are wondering, why the hell is that wrong? The reason that that cost me a lot of time is that it was a really vague problem. So if you think about ED, it's an umbrella term that encompasses somebody who had their prostate removed and literally cannot have an erection, all the way to like the kid on prom night who's had a couple drinks and he's nervous and can't get hard. And both of those things sort of fit under the umbrella. And so it's a non-specific problem and it's vague. And so what I figured out is that when I had that as my marker of what was going on in my head, it created no action because it's really hard to solve a vague problem. So like if I'm like, hey, I want you to fix your check engine light, it's really hard to do because you don't know what's going on. So what is the thing that you would do next once you have a check engine light come on? You would either take it to a mechanic or you would plug in a device that'll tell you what's wrong with it, because you can't fix check engine light. But a specific problem like your radiator exploded, that's a very specific thing and you can come up with a specific solution. So if I could go back and do this over again, instead of spending so much time just thinking about this in terms of ED, I would clarify the problem to basically be able to say it in one sentence. Because what I found in my life is that when I can sum my problem up in one sentence, it's a lot easier to solve. And a lot of times when I don't take action, it's because I'm not really clear what the problem is. And so if you would like some help with this, I've actually created a mini course. It's actually 100% free. It's available on my website today. And so it'll help you analyze your situation and then get a really clear understanding of what the problem is. And then I've also given you a framework that you can use on your own to fix the problem. So if you want to cut years off your ED, this course is banging. So go to nopillsnosurgery.com and get started. So the next thing that I would do differently is I would slow down. So what I mean by that is that I spent a lot of time like looking for instant fixes, and basically what that led me to do was just try things over and over and over and over again. But I was trying them in the context of like, did this fix the problem today immediately? And there's a couple solutions that I can think of that probably would have worked, but I didn't actually give them enough time to see. And the reason that I think this is so important is that what I've realized over time is that ED is not one problem. It's actually a bunch of small problems. And so you're not going to find one solution that just fixes it today. You really need to take a long-term view of it. And so what I would do if I could go back in time to save myself a lot of time is I would actually focus on trying to make ED better 3 months from now instead of trying to make it better today. Because if I'm expecting a result today on something that is actually a bunch of little problems, I'm actually just setting myself up for failure. And so the next thing that I would do is I would actually speed up. What I mean by this is I would basically go through a cycle where I would try and then I would fail and then I would just wallow. And so why this cost me a lot of time is that I would stay devastated for months before I'd try something new. And what I realized eventually is it's such a cliche, but it's so true, and that's that failure is where the lessons are. I've learned more about how to get hard by the times where I couldn't get hard than I learned from getting hard. And so what I would do differently for myself is I would try and I would fail and then I would learn as quickly as possible and then try again as quickly as possible. Because I look back on the periods of time where I was just wallowing and I was miserable, and it definitely adds up to years. I know for sure 3 years, the first 3 years I didn't put nearly enough effort into trying. And then even after that, the solutions that I tried, I would have such big gaps between them that it was completely wasted time. So those are the 5 things that I would do differently. Hopefully you got something out of that. And if you would like more stuff like this, please hit the like button and subscribe so that you can get notifications when I put out new videos. And if you want more help with your ED, getting a clear understanding of what's happening and how to fix it, go to nopillsnosurgery.com.